42 years as a firefighter taught me one thing. The most dangerous fires don't start with a spark. They start with someone you trust, holding a match behind your back. At my housewarming party, my daughter-in-law Kendra handed me a margarita and whispered, "To new beginnings, Dad." I almost drank it. Almost. But my 8-year-old grandson Diego pulled my hand and said, "Grandpa, look at my drawing." I set the glass down. My son Daniel reached past me and drank it without thinking. 20 minutes later, he collapsed in a pool of his own blood on my brand new kitchen floor. Before we continue, thank you for being here with me. If this opening touched something in you, I would truly love to know where you are watching from. Your presence here genuinely matters. And if stories like this resonate with you, please consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. Just a quick note. Some elements ahead have been fictionalized to protect privacy and highlight the message. Any resemblance to real events or individuals is purely coincidental, but the message you are about to hear is deeply meaningful. My name is George Navarro, and I am 68 years old. I earned every year of it hauling hose through smoke-filled hallways, kicking down doors that radiated heat like ovens, pulling strangers out of buildings that wanted to collapse on top of us. 42 years with the San Antonio Fire Department. Captain of Station. 14 for the last 12. When I finally hung up my turnout gear, I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me. I was wrong. The house was a hill country stone beauty on half an acre outside the city limits. Limestone walls, cedar porch posts, a backyard shaded by a pecan tree so old its branches touched the roof. I bought it 3 months after I decided that sitting alone in the apartment Rosa and I shared for 38 years was going to kill me slower than any fire ever could. Rosa, my wife, gone 18 months. Pulmonary fibrosis took her lungs the way a brush fire takes dry grass. Steady and complete and merciless. The money came from my pension and a settlement from the chemical plant fire of 2019. A ruptured tank sprayed aerosolized chlorine across our crew. 3 of us ended up with permanent lung damage. I put every dollar aside, added it to what Rosa and I had saved over a lifetime of sacrifice, and I bought this house. It was a Saturday in early June. Texas sun white and heavy, the air above the grill shimmering in visible currents. I had spent all morning smoking brisket over post oak the way my father taught me, strung lights across the patio, set out coolers of beer and sweet tea. Everything was ready. Tommy Reeves arrived first, because Tommy always arrived first. 63, built like a fire hydrant, 21 years together at Station 14. He pulled me into a hug, whistled at the living room, and said, "Georgie, Rosa would have loved this place. She would have hated the kitchen layout." We laughed. It felt good. More guests came. Old crew from Station 14. Neighbors who brought casseroles and opinions. Tejano music played through the speakers. For a while, standing in my own home surrounded by people who earned the right to be there, I felt something I had not felt since Rosa died. I felt like I belonged somewhere again. Daniel and Kendra arrived around 5:30. My son was 35. A fire inspector with the department. He investigated the scenes I used to work. Different side of the same coin. He had Rosa's calm and my stubbornness. Diego burst through the door first, 8 years old, miniature fire department t-shirt. He crashed into my legs hard enough to buckle my knees. "Grandpa, your house is huge. Is it bigger than the fire station?" Then Kendra walked in. 33. Emergency room nurse at University Hospital. She had one of those smiles that arrived before she did. Bright. Practiced. She kissed my cheek and introduced the woman beside her. "This is Megan, a friend from the hospital." Megan Calloway shook my hand. Early 40s, firm grip, direct eye contact. As the evening settled, I noticed her asking questions that sounded casual but weren't. Square footage, land values, retirement planning, less like small talk and more like an appraisal. I filed it away. On a fire scene, you catalog details before you know they matter. Kendra moved to the outdoor bar near the grill. She lined up tequila, triple sec, and lime juice with the precision of someone who measured things for a living. Then she made one more glass. This one she handled differently. She poured, paused, stirred with a focus that didn't match the atmosphere. Set it on a napkin, separate from the others, and carried it to me, with both hands. Your favorite, Dad. Classic margarita. You have earned this. I took the glass. The salt rim caught the last daylight. To new beginnings, she said. I was raising it to my lips when a small hand grabbed my wrist. Grandpa, look. Diego held up construction paper covered in crayon. A fire truck with oversized wheels and a ladder reaching the top of the page. Block letters read, Grandpa's truck. I set the glass on the patio table and crouched down. This is the finest fire truck I have ever seen, Diego. He beamed. I kissed the top of his head. I did not see Daniel step up behind me. Did not see him reach for the glass on the table. Did not see how much he drank in that first long swallow. 15 minutes later, Daniel pressed his fingers to his temple. Just hot out here, he said, loosening his collar. But something about the way he steadied himself against the porch railing made the hair on my neck stand up. 42 years of reading emergencies. My body recognized danger before my brain caught up. 5 minutes after that, his nose began to bleed. Not a trickle. A stream. He grabbed napkins, but blood soaked through instantly. His eyes went wide. His knees buckled. I caught him. Lowered him to the ground. Turned him on his side. Blood spread across the limestone tile I had picked because it reminded me of the old missions downtown. Somebody call 911. Command voice. No panic. Even though my son was bleeding out on my kitchen floor, Tommy had his phone out in 2 seconds. Kendra dropped beside us, tears streaming. Daniel, can you hear me? Diego's voice cut through everything. Grandpa, is Daddy going to be a firefighter, Angel? No, buddy. Daddy is going to be fine. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. Engine 14. My station. Men I had trained. Now they were carrying my son. I climbed into the ambulance and took Daniel's hand. It was cold. Through the small window in the back door, I caught one last glimpse of my house. Kendra stood in the doorway, hands pressed to her mouth, tears catching the porch light. She looked like a woman watching her world fall apart. But I had spent 42 years reading fire scenes. I knew the difference between a building that burned by accident and one that was set on fire on purpose. Something about Kendra's grief didn't read like devastation. It read like an arsonist watching the wrong building burn. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning, or at least to the version of the beginning that makes sense of everything that came after. I was born in San Antonio in 1956. Third generation Tejano. My grandfather came from Nuevo Laredo with $12 and a willingness to work jobs that would break most men in half. My father drove a delivery truck for a bakery on the south side for 31 years. Never missed a shift, never complained. When I told him at 17 that I wanted to be a firefighter, he looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "Good. A man should spend his life doing something that matters." I joined the San Antonio Fire Department at 22. Probationary firefighter assigned to Station 9 on the east side, the busiest house in the city. My first structure fire was a 2-story duplex on Hackberry Street. I remember the heat hitting me through my facepiece, like opening an oven door with your whole body. I remember the sound, that deep growl that fire makes when it has enough fuel and oxygen to do whatever it wants. I remember my captain grabbing my shoulder and shouting, "Stay low. Follow the hose line." The hose line always leads you out. I followed hose lines for 42 years after that. Through apartment complexes and warehouses, restaurants and churches, schools and nursing homes, I learned to read fire the way some people read faces. The color of the smoke told you what was burning. The speed of the spread told you how much time you had. The behavior of the flames at the windows told you whether the structure was still holding or whether it was about to let go and come down on top of you. I got good at it. Good enough that they promoted me to captain of Station 14 when I was 46, and I held that position for 12 years until I retired. But every firefighter carries scars. And I don't just mean the ones you can see. October 23, 2019. A chemical storage facility on the southeast side. Routine hazmat call. Or so we thought. We were establishing a perimeter when a storage tank ruptured without warning. Aerosolized chlorine gas spread across the staging area in seconds. 3 of us caught the worst of it. I spent 11 days in the ICU at University Hospital, the same hospital where my daughter-in-law would later work, breathing through a tube while doctors explained that my lungs would never fully recover. Pulmonary scarring, they called it. Permanent reduction in lung capacity. I would need medication for the rest of my life to manage inflammation and prevent further deterioration. The department gave us a settlement. Enough to matter, but not enough to feel like justice. I put it all in savings and went back to work for 3 more years, because firefighters don't quit. We just get slower. Rosa was the one who finally convinced me to retire. My wife of 38 years. The woman who packed my lunch every shift for 4 decades, who learned to sleep through the sound of my pager going off at 2 in the morning, who never once asked me to choose a safer career even though I know she wanted to. Rosa Maria Delgado Navarro. She had the kind of beauty that didn't announce itself. Dark eyes that noticed everything. Hands that could make tamales for 40 people on Christmas Eve and still have energy to dance in the kitchen afterward. She taught 4th grade at Brackenridge Elementary for 26 years, and every single one of her former students remembered her name. She was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis 6 months after I retired. The irony was not lost on me. I had survived 42 years of smoke inhalation, chemical exposure, and collapsing buildings. And it was Rosa, who had never set foot inside a burning structure, whose lungs failed first. 14 months. That is how long we had between her diagnosis and the morning I woke up and she was gone. I will not describe those months in detail because some pain is too precise for words. I will tell you that I learned to operate a home oxygen system the way I had once learned to operate a hydraulic rescue tool. That I held her hand every night until she fell asleep. That she made me promise 3 days before the end that I would not spend the rest of my life sitting in a dark apartment talking to her photograph. "You are a firefighter, George," she said, her voice barely a whisper through the oxygen mask. "You run toward life. Don't stop, because I am not there to watch." So, I didn't stop. 18 months after Rosa died, I found the house. Hill country stone on half an acre. The moment I walked through the front door, I felt something shift in my chest. Not grief exactly, but the space grief leaves behind when it starts to loosen its grip. The living room had windows facing south, and the morning light came through them the way it used to come through our apartment on Flores Street, golden and warm and full of dust motes that Rosa used to say were angels checking in on us. I bought it the same week. Moved in over a long weekend, with Tommy's help and a rented truck. Set up the bedroom first, then the kitchen, then the small room at the end of the hall that I designated as Diego's. I put a shelf in there for his fire truck collection and taped his drawings to the wall. The first morning I woke before dawn and walked through every room the way I had walked through 1,000 structures during my career. Checking corners where walls met ceilings. Testing windows to make sure they opened smoothly for emergency egress. Inspecting the smoke detectors in every room. Pressing the test button, listening for the chirp. I found the gas shutoff valve behind the stove and memorized its location. I checked the water heater, the electrical panel, the carbon monoxide detectors. Old habits. 42 years of entering buildings and immediately identifying every way they could kill you doesn't just disappear because you retire. Everything was solid. Everything was safe. Everything was mine. But standing in the bathroom that first morning, brushing my teeth, I noticed something that bothered me in a way I could not articulate. My breathing. It was worse. Not dramatically. Not the kind of change that sends you to the emergency room, but a tightness that hadn't been there 6 months ago. A shortness at the top of each inhale, like my lungs were hitting a ceiling they hadn't hit before. I checked my medication. The bottle sat in the cabinet, properly labeled. George Navarro. Prednisone. 10 milligrams, daily. Take with food. I had been taking it every morning without fail since 2019. I swallowed the pill with water and coffee the way I always did. And I told myself it was just age. Just the scar tissue settling. Just the natural progression of lungs that had breathed too much smoke for too many years. But there was a feeling. Small and stubborn, like an ember that refuses to go out no matter how much water you pour on it. The feeling that something was wrong with those pills, that they weren't doing what they used to do, that something had changed, even though the label was the same, and the bottle was the same, and the routine was the same. I ignored it. Because what kind of man suspects his own medication? What kind of mind goes there? The kind of mind that spent 42 years learning that the most dangerous fires are the ones you don't see coming. If there is one thing Diego inherited from me, it is the inability to sit still. My grandson was 8 years old and moved through the world like a small, controlled explosion. Questions fired in every direction. Why do fire trucks have ladders? Why is the sky blue at the top and orange at the bottom? Grandpa, if you could put out any fire in history, which one would you pick? He had Rosa's eyes, dark and wide and missing nothing, and his mother's jawline, sharp even at 8. But his engine, that restless need to understand how everything worked and why, that was pure Navarro. He wanted to be a firefighter. Had wanted it since he was 4. When Daniel first brought him to Station 14 for a tour, and one of the guys let him sit in the captain's seat of the engine, Diego didn't just sit there. He grabbed the steering wheel with both hands, looked out the windshield at the apparatus bay doors, and said with absolute conviction, "I am ready. Let's go save people." The whole crew fell apart laughing. I still have the photograph pinned to my refrigerator. Daniel, my son, was 35 and worked the other side of the fire service. While I had spent my career putting fires out, Daniel spent his figuring out how they started. Fire inspector for the San Antonio Fire Department. He walked through burned buildings the way detectives walk through crime scenes, reading char patterns and V-marks on walls, tracing the path of fire back to its origin the way you trace a river to its source. He was methodical, patient, and maddeningly thorough. Rosa's calm wrapped around my stubbornness. A quiet man who noticed everything and said very little until he was certain. He called me every Sunday evening. Never missed. Not when he was busy. Not when he was tired. Not even during the worst weeks after Rosa's death, when neither of us could get through a sentence without our voices breaking. He remembered the anniversary of Rosa's passing without being reminded. He brought flowers to her grave on her birthday. He was the kind of son that makes a father wonder what he did right, and whether he deserves the credit. Daniel married Kendra Blake 8 years ago. In a ceremony at the San Fernando Cathedral downtown. Rosa was still alive then, sitting in the front pew in a blue dress that matched the stained glass, crying the kind of tears mothers cry when they watch their sons choose a partner. She had liked Kendra. Most people liked Kendra. It was difficult not to. Kendra Blake Navarro was 33, an emergency room nurse at University Hospital, and she was the kind of person who made you feel like you were the only one in the room. She remembered names. She asked follow-up questions about things you mentioned weeks earlier. She brought homemade soup when you were sick and flowers when you were not. When Rosa was in the hospital for the last time, Kendra sat with her for hours, adjusting pillows, monitoring oxygen levels, speaking to the nurses in their own clinical language to make sure my wife received exactly the right care at exactly the right time. I was grateful for that. Deeply grateful. And for a long time, gratitude was all I felt. But over the years, small things began to accumulate. Not red flags exactly. More like faint traces of smoke, where there shouldn't have been any. Her lifestyle, for one. Kendra drove a BMW X5 that she'd traded up to 2 years ago. She carried handbags with names I only knew because Rosa used to point them out in magazines. She wore jewelry that caught the light in expensive ways. An ER nurse in San Antonio makes decent money, but not that kind of money. Not BMW and designer handbag money. I noticed Daniel picking up restaurant checks more often than he used to. Noticed him wearing the same 3 pairs of work boots he'd had for years, while Kendra rotated through shoes I had never seen before. Not my business, I told myself. Every marriage has its own economy. Rosa and I had ours. Daniel and Kendra had theirs. But the math didn't balance. And my brain, trained over decades to calculate loads and capacities and tolerances, couldn't stop running the numbers. Then, 4 months before my housewarming party, Kendra brought it up at dinner. We were at their house. Daniel was in the kitchen plating dessert. Diego was in the living room building a fire station out of Legos. Kendra and I were at the dining table, and she leaned toward me with that warm, concerned expression she deployed like a perfectly calibrated instrument. "Dad, I have been thinking." She folded her hands on the table. "With your lung condition, have you considered setting up a medical power of attorney, just in case something happens and you can't make decisions for yourself?" I set my fork down. "I am 68, Kendra. Not 88. Of course. But responsible planning is never too early. You know how unpredictable respiratory conditions can be. If your health declines suddenly, and Daniel has to make medical decisions on your behalf, it would be so much easier if the paperwork were already in place." She said it with genuine warmth. Her eyes were soft. Her voice held just the right note of concern. If I had been anyone else, I would have nodded along and signed whatever she put in front of me, but I was not anyone else. I was a man who had spent 42 years walking into burning buildings. And the first thing they teach you in fire school is this: find the smoke before you find the fire, because smoke tells you where the fire is hiding if your health declines. The phrase stuck in my throat like ash. She had not said if something happens. She had said if your health declines. Present tense shifting to future, as though decline were not a possibility, but an expectation, as though she knew something about my health trajectory that I did not. "I will think about it," I said. Kendra smiled. "Of course, Dad. No pressure. Just something to consider." Daniel came back with dessert. The conversation moved on. Diego showed me his Lego fire station, and I told him the engine bay doors needed to be wider because real trucks are bigger than he thought. He redesigned them on the spot with the seriousness of an architect reviewing blueprints. But later that night, driving home through the dark hill country roads, I couldn't shake it. The way Kendra had leaned in, the way she had folded her hands, the body language of someone presenting a prepared case, the precision of her words. If your health declines. Not if. When. Rosa would have told me I was being paranoid. She would have said, "Kendra is a nurse, George. She thinks about these things professionally. It is not personal." But Rosa was not here anymore, and my firefighter's instinct, the one that could smell an accelerant through 3 layers of ash, the one that had kept me alive through 4 decades of work that killed other men, that instinct was whispering something I did not want to hear. Kendra's concern had a temperature that didn't match. Like walking into a room where the thermostat reads normal but the walls are hot to the touch. Everything looks fine. Everything sounds fine, but something underneath is burning. And if you don't find it soon, the whole structure comes down. I told myself I was wrong. Told myself I was a paranoid old man looking for fires where there were none. Told myself that my daughter-in-law, who had sat with Rosa in her final days, who called me dad with what sounded like affection, who was raising my grandson to be kind and curious and brave, could not possibly be what my gut was telling me she was. I almost believed it. Almost. I woke at 5 the morning of the party. June 8th. The bedroom was still dark, but through the window I could see the first pale line of light along the eastern ridge where the hill country meets the sky. Rosa used to say that a house talks to you if you know how to listen. I lay there for a moment, letting this one speak. Then I did what I always did. I walked the house, every room, every corner. Smoke detectors first. I pressed each test button and waited for the chirp. All 5 responded. Carbon monoxide detectors next, one in the hallway, one near the water heater. Both active, both green. I found the gas shutoff valve behind the stove and confirmed it was fully closed. No residual smell, no hiss from the line. I tested every window for emergency egress, checked the fire extinguisher under the kitchen sink. Pressure gauge in the green zone, 42 years. The habit was as automatic as breathing, which, I noted again that morning, was slightly harder than it should have been. That tightness at the top of each inhale. I took my medication with my second cup of coffee and told myself it was the humidity. Humidity does things to damaged lungs. By 8, I was outside setting up the grill. A proper offset smoker I had bought second-hand from a retired pitmaster in Lockhart. Post oak in the firebox, the only acceptable wood for brisket in this part of Texas. No lighter fluid. My father would have disowned me. The brisket had been rubbed with salt and coarse black pepper the night before. I set it on the grate fat side up and closed the lid. 225 degrees for 12 hours. Some things cannot be rushed. While the brisket worked, I set up the patio. Coolers packed with Lone Star. Big Red for the kids, and sweet tea brewed strong enough to stand a spoon in. Lights strung between the porch posts and the pecan tree. Chairs arranged in clusters. A speaker near the back door loaded with Rosa's Tejano playlist. Flaco Jimenez. Little Joe. Selena. Music that sounded like home. Tommy pulled in at 4:30. An hour early, carrying a case of Shiner Bock and a socket set. Brought beer and tools, he said. In case your grill needs adjusting, or your guests need loosening up. We stood by the smoker drinking Shiners while the sun started its slow descent. He lifted the lid, inspected the bark with surgical seriousness, and nodded. You remembered the butcher paper. What am I? An amateur. For those quiet minutes, everything felt exactly right. Guests arrived around 5. Bobby Salazar, Eddie Munoz, Frank De La Cruz. Old crew from Station 14. Neighbors came too. The Petersons with a peach cobbler. The Garzas, who had lived on this road for 30 years. The house filled with the sounds I had hoped for. Conversation and laughter. Ice settling in coolers, accordion, and bajo sexto through the speakers. Smoke from the grill mixing with warm evening air. It smelled like every backyard gathering in San Antonio, which is to say it smelled like family. Then Daniel's truck turned into the driveway. Diego was out before the engine was off, sprinting across the lawn. I caught him mid-stride and swung him up. Grandpa, I brought my drawing for your house. He waved a rolled piece of construction paper like a flag. Daniel came up the walk carrying bags of ice. He set them down, hugged me, and scanned the yard with that quiet precision of his. Fire inspector's eye. Always reading the scene. Place looks great, Dad. Your mother would have rearranged everything. Twice. He smiled. Then Kendra appeared through the side gate, carrying a canvas bag and leading a woman I did not recognize. She wore a white sundress and heeled sandals that were entirely wrong for a backyard barbecue on limestone, but entirely right for making an entrance. Dad. She kissed my cheek. You remember Megan, don't you? From our hospital charity gala last year. I ran into her and insisted she come tonight. Megan Calloway shook my hand. Early 40s. Dark hair pulled tight. Firm grip. And direct eye contact that held a beat too long. Something about her felt calibrated. Like a smoke detector adjusted to a very specific sensitivity. Welcome, Megan. Any friend of Kendra's. As the evening deepened and the sky shifted from blue to amber, I circulated among guests. Slicing brisket. Refilling drinks. Accepting compliments on the house. But I kept noticing Megan. She drifted from Tommy, asking about the neighborhood, to Bobby Salazar, asking about the fire department pension system, to the Petersons, asking about property values along this road. Charity gala coordinators don't usually ask about pension systems and land assessments. I filed it away, the way I filed the smell of accelerant at a scene. Not enough to call an alarm, but enough to keep my eyes open. And then there was Kendra. She had moved to the outdoor bar I had set up near the grill. Bottles of tequila, triple sec, lime juice, agave syrup. She arranged them with the spatial awareness of someone who worked in an emergency room, where reaching the right medication in 3 seconds means the difference between life and death. She mixed drinks for guests with casual efficiency, laughing, touching arms, making everyone feel special. But I watched her hands. I had spent 42 years watching hands. Hands on hose nozzles. Hands on rescue tools. Hands on victims' pulses. You learn things about people by watching their hands that their faces will never tell you. And Kendra's hands, as she measured and poured, had a steadiness that went beyond bartending. They had the steadiness of someone accustomed to precise dosage. She looked up and caught me watching. Her smile was instant. "Almost ready for yours, Dad. I am making you something special." I smiled back. But somewhere behind my ribs, in the place where instinct lives, something tightened. Not my lungs this time. Something older. Something that had kept me alive through 4 decades of walking into places where other men died. Smoke before fire. I could smell it now. And I still couldn't see where it was coming from. The light was fading when Kendra brought me the glass. The sun had dropped behind the western ridge, leaving the sky streaked in orange and violet. Patio lights clicked on, casting warm glow across the yard. Guests had spread out, some by the grill where Tommy was telling a warehouse fire story. Others inside where the air conditioning offered relief. The Tejano playlist had shifted to a ballad Rosa used to hum while she washed dishes. Kendra moved behind the bar with purpose. I watched from across the patio, pretending to listen to Eddie talk about his daughter's wedding. But my eyes kept returning to her hands. She bypassed 2 identical glasses and chose a third. One she had positioned apart from the others on a folded napkin. She poured tequila first, measuring with her eyes the way a nurse measures medication. Not guessing. Calculating. Then triple sec, lime juice from a pitcher she had prepared ahead of time. Agave syrup in a precise amount. She stirred with a long spoon in slow, deliberate circles, paused, glanced toward me, then away, then back to the glass. I had watched thousands of people perform tasks in my career. Firefighters, tying knots, paramedics, starting lines, hazmat teams handling chemicals that could kill a room if someone sneezed wrong. I knew what concentration looked like. What Kendra was doing looked like dosage. She picked up the glass with both hands and walked toward me. Smile warm and wide, steps measured. She held the glass the way you hold something precious or something dangerous. "Here you go, Dad. Your special margarita. You have earned every sip." Cold glass in my hand. Salt on the rim. Lime wedge, balanced on the edge. "To new beginnings," she said. I raised the glass. The rim touched my lip. "Grandpa." A small hand grabbed my wrist. Not gently. With the urgency that only children and fire alarms possess. Diego stood at my elbow holding construction paper. His face was flushed with excitement. He had been waiting for this moment all evening. "Look at my drawing. I made it for your new house." I lowered the glass. Set it on the patio table without thinking. Crouched down, knees protesting, and looked at what my grandson had made. A fire truck. Bright red crayon. Oversized wheels. A ladder reaching the top of the page. 2 stick figures beside it. One tall with a yellow helmet. One small with a wide smile. Block letters across the bottom. "Grandpa's truck. That is you." Diego pointed to the tall figure. "And that is me. We are saving people together." My throat tightened. "This is the finest fire truck I have ever seen, Diego." He beamed with the total radiant pride that only an 8-year-old can produce. I kissed the top of his head. He smelled like sunscreen and big red soda, and the sweetness of childhood that disappears so gradually you don't notice until it is gone. Behind me, a glass was lifted from the table. I did not hear it, did not see it. Daniel had stepped onto the patio from the kitchen where he had been refilling ice. He saw a margarita on the table, condensation running down the sides. He picked it up casually, the way anyone picks up a drink at a party, and took a long swallow while walking toward Tommy by the grill. I was still crouched beside Diego when the first sign appeared. 12 minutes. Daniel wiped his forehead, loosened his collar. His face turned a deeper red that had nothing to do with the temperature. I called across the yard. "You all right, son?" "Yeah, just warm." He waved me off. But his posture had changed. He was gripping the porch railing in a way that was not casual. 42 years of reading emergencies had wired me to detect patterns that conscious thought was too slow to catch. 17 minutes. Daniel walked toward the kitchen. Unsteady gait. Not drunk. Something mechanical. Like a system losing pressure. Through the doorway, I heard him tell Kendra he had a headache. Felt dizzy. Her voice was smooth and concerned. "Pitch perfect. Maybe you are coming down with something, honey. 20 minutes. Daniel's nose began to bleed. Not a trickle. A stream. He pressed a napkin to his face. It soaked through in seconds. Another napkin. Another. Blood running down his chin, dripping onto his shirt. His eyes found mine across the kitchen. Wide. Frightened. "Dad." His knees buckled. 3 strides. 42 years of muscle memory. I caught him under the arms, lowered him to the floor, turned him on his side, kept his airway clear. Blood spreading across the limestone tiles I had chosen because they reminded me of the old missions downtown. "Somebody call 911. Command voice. No panic. Even though my son was bleeding on my kitchen floor and every cell in my body was screaming, Tommy had his phone out instantly. Bobby cleared the doorway, moving guests back. Eddie turned Diego away, but not before my grandson saw his father on the floor. "Grandpa." His voice was small and broken. "Is Daddy going to be a firefighter angel?" "Nobody. Daddy is going to be fine." Kendra knelt beside us, tears streaming, hands trembling. "Daniel, can you hear me?" I kept pressure on his nose. Blood at the corners of his mouth now. Eyes unfocused. His hand in mine went slack. Sirens. 7 minutes. Engine 14. My station. My crew. Paramedics moved through the front door with the efficiency I had drilled into them. They took over, started lines, called vitals into the radio. I climbed into the ambulance, held my son's hand, cold and limp. Doors slammed. Siren screamed. Through the rear window, one last glimpse. Porch lights on. Guests frozen on the lawn. Kendra in the doorway, hands over her mouth. Tears on her cheeks. She looked like a woman whose world was ending. But I had spent 42 years on fire scenes. I knew the difference between a building that burned by accident and one where someone struck the match on purpose. Accidental fires are chaotic, surprised by their own destruction. Arson is calm. Arson watches. Kendra was watching. And the thing she was watching burn was not the thing she had intended to set on fire. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room at University Hospital hummed a frequency I had memorized decades ago. Every firefighter knows that sound, the flat, indifferent buzzing that separates the living from the dying. I had walked through doors like these carrying strangers, colleagues, children. Tonight, I walked through them carrying the weight of my only son. They wheeled Daniel through a set of double doors marked Trauma Bay 2 at 9:47 p.m. A nurse in navy scrubs pressed her palm against my chest and said, "Sir, you need to wait here." I wanted to tell her I had pulled a man from a burning apartment on South Flores Street with one arm while holding a ceiling joist with the other. I wanted to tell her that waiting was the one thing 42 years of fire service never taught me how to do. Instead, I nodded and stepped back. The doors closed with a soft pneumatic sigh, and Daniel disappeared. The waiting room smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. Tommy sat beside me in a plastic chair that was too small for his frame. He had followed the ambulance in his truck and arrived 6 minutes after we did. His boots still had barbecue ash on them. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Tommy understood silence, the way only a man who had stood next to you inside burning buildings could understand it. He put his hand on my shoulder once, squeezed, and let go. Diego was with the Petersons. I had called Linda Peterson from the ambulance and asked her to take him home, give him warm milk, and tell him Daddy had a stomachache. Linda did not ask questions. She simply said, "We've got him, George. Focus on Daniel." I could hear Diego in the background asking if the fire truck was coming back. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady until the call ended. Kendra arrived at 10:22 p.m. She had driven herself. Her eyes were swollen, and her mascara traced dark lines down both cheeks. She sat 2 chairs away from me, not beside me, and folded her hands in her lap. A wife whose husband is dying sits as close to the nearest person as possible. She grabs arms, she paces, she begs for information at the front desk every 4 minutes. Kendra sat still. She sat like someone in a theater, watching a scene she had already rehearsed. I filed that observation the way I used to file the color of smoke, not as proof, but as data. At 11:15, a doctor came through the double doors. His badge read, Dr. Alan Medina, Emergency Medicine. He was mid-40s, tired around the eyes, and spoke with the careful cadence of a man delivering news he had delivered too many times. "Mr. Navarro, your son ingested a substance that caused a significant coagulopathy. His blood lost its ability to clot properly. We're running a full toxicology panel now, but the preliminary indicators suggest an anticoagulant compound, likely potassium chloride or a related agent, at a dose far exceeding any therapeutic range." Tommy leaned forward. "You're saying he was poisoned?" Dr. Medina paused. "I'm saying the compound in his system did not get there from food or alcohol alone. We have stabilized him with intravenous vitamin K, fresh frozen plasma, and calcium gluconate. His vitals are holding. The next 12 hours are critical." I asked the only question that mattered. "Can I see him?" Dr. Medina led me through the double doors, down a corridor that smelled like iodine, and into a room where Daniel lay on a bed surrounded by machines. An IV line ran into his left arm. A cardiac monitor beeped in steady green peaks. His face was the color of candle wax, and there was still a faint rust-colored stain beneath his right nostril where the nurses had not finished cleaning. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell with a rhythm. I recognized the rhythm of a man fighting to stay on the surface. I pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down. I took his hand. It was warm, which meant his circulation was intact. I counted his pulse through his wrist, 74 beats per minute, steady, no arrhythmia, old habit. In a fire, you check the vitals of every person you carry out, even after the paramedics take over, because trust is something you verify. "I'm here, Maijo," I whispered. "Your old man's right here." His fingers twitched against my palm. Whether it was reflex or recognition, I chose to believe it was recognition. I sat in that chair for 3 hours. Tommy brought me coffee from a vending machine at midnight. Kendra came in once, stood at the foot of the bed for exactly 4 minutes, then said she needed air and left. 4 minutes. I timed it without meaning to. At 2:17 a.m., a nurse named Janet checked Daniel's blood draw results and told me the full toxicology would be ready by morning. She also said something that lodged in my brain like a splinter. "Mr. Navarro, in 20 years of emergency nursing, I have never seen this level of anticoagulant in a patient who wasn't already on blood-thinning medication. Someone measured this. Someone measured this." I stared at the cardiac monitor and watched the green lines spike and fall, spike and fall. In 42 years, I had learned that every fire has a point of origin, a single place where heat, fuel, and oxygen meet. Find the origin, and you find the cause. Find the cause, and you find the arsonist. The green line spiked. Fell. Spiked. I was going to find the origin of this fire. I left the hospital at 6:14 a.m. on June 9th. The sun was already pressing against the hill country like a flat iron, and the parking lot shimmered with that early Texas heat that promises worse by noon. Tommy offered to drive me home, but I told him I needed the wheel in my hands. Driving was the only thing that still felt like control. The house looked different in the morning light. The patio chairs were still arranged in a half circle from the party. The brisket smoker sat cold and closed. A string of lights Tommy had hung between the porch posts swayed in a breeze that carried the faint smell of mesquite ash. Everything was exactly where we had left it. And yet everything had changed. A crime scene always looks ordinary from the outside. That is what makes it dangerous. I walked through the back door and stood in the kitchen. The limestone floor still had a faint brown smear near the island where Daniel had fallen. Someone, probably Linda Peterson, had tried to clean it. But blood finds the grain of stone and holds. I had seen that truth in 100 fire aftermaths, where the water washed away the char, but never the stain beneath it. The margarita glass was gone. Tommy told me later that the paramedics had bagged it as part of their standard intake protocol. Good. I needed that glass tested, but I also needed to do my own sweep first. 42 years of fire investigation taught me one rule above all others. Walk the scene before anyone else interprets it for you. I started in the kitchen. Kendra had mixed the drinks on the granite countertop near the sink. I opened the cabinet above the counter: tequila, triple sec, agave syrup, a bag of limes, all standard. I unscrewed each bottle cap and smelled. Tequila smelled like tequila. Triple sec smelled like orange peel. Agave smelled sweet and clean. Nothing unusual. If the poison was in the drink, she had added it separately. Probably from something she carried in her purse or pocket. A nurse would know how to dose a liquid without changing its color or taste. Then I walked to the bathroom. My medication cabinet sat above the sink. A simple wooden box with a magnetic latch that Rosa had picked out years ago. Inside, prednisone 10 milligrams. Prescribed for the pulmonary scarring from the 2019 chemical fire. Albuterol inhaler for breakthrough wheezing. A bottle of daily multivitamins. Aspirin, 81 milligrams. Low dose. I picked up the prednisone bottle. 30 tablets per refill, filled on May 28th at Walgreens on Bandera Road. I had taken one tablet each morning for 12 days. June 9th, minus May 28th. That meant 18 pills should remain. I poured them into my palm and counted. 14. 4 pills missing. I counted again. 14. I set them on the counter in a row and counted a third time, touching each one with my index finger. 14. I had not dropped any. I had not skipped a dose. I had not given any to anyone. 4 tablets of prednisone 10 milligrams were gone, and the only people who had been inside this house since May 28th were me, Tommy, Daniel, Kendra, and Diego. Tommy did not go near my bathroom. Daniel used the guest restroom. Diego was 8 years old and afraid of medicine bottles because Rosa used to tell him they were grown-up candy that makes kids sick. That left Kendra. I put the 14 pills back in the bottle and set it on the counter. Then I picked up the albuterol inhaler. It felt lighter than it should. I pressed the canister. The mist that came out was thin, almost vaporless, with none of the bitter metallic bite that albuterol carries. I pressed again. Same result. I had refilled this inhaler on the same date as the prednisone. A new canister holds 200 doses. I had used it maybe 15 times. It should have felt nearly full. Instead, it felt like it had been emptied and refilled with something else. My chest tightened, and this time it was not the scarred lungs. It was the recognition that comes when you find the second point of origin in what you thought was a single-source fire. 2 origins means arson. 2 origins means planning. 2 origins means someone wanted to make sure that if one method failed, another was already burning. I placed the inhaler in a plastic Ziploc bag from the kitchen drawer. I placed 4 prednisone tablets in a second bag. I wrote the date, time, and contents on each bag with a black Sharpie, the same way I had labeled evidence bags at fire scenes for 3 decades. Then I opened my phone and searched for private toxicology laboratories in San Antonio. The first result was Lone Star Analytical Services on Wurzbach Road, 7 miles from my house. They offered same-day screening for $240. I taped both bags shut, put them in the glove compartment of my truck, and drove to Lone Star Analytical. The intake technician, a young woman named Priya, asked me what I suspected. I told her I did not want to bias the results. Test everything, I said. Tell me what should be there and what should not. She promised results within 72 hours. On the drive home, I passed Station 14. The bay doors were open, and Engine 14 sat in the morning sun, freshly washed, red paint gleaming. I slowed the truck, but did not stop. That engine had carried my son to the hospital. It had also carried me to 1,000 fires. Now I was running my own investigation, and the fire was inside my family. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat in the silence. 4 missing pills. A hollow inhaler, a measured dose of poison in a margarita glass. 3 data points. In fire science, 3 points define a burn pattern. A burn pattern tells you where the fire started, how it traveled, and who lit the match. I knew where this fire started. Now I needed to prove who lit it. The next 3 days moved like smoke through a ventilation shaft, slow, deliberate, filling every corner of the house with a weight you could feel but not see. I kept my routine because routine is the scaffolding that holds a man upright when the floor beneath him is cracking. Wake at 5. Coffee, black. 2 scoops. Rosa's old percolator. Prednisone. I counted the remaining 14 tablets each morning before I took one. 13. 12. 11. Each number was a quiet confirmation that no one had entered my bathroom again. I visited Daniel twice a day. Morning and evening, 40 minutes each, the maximum the ICU allowed for non-spouse visitors. Kendra had registered herself as primary next of kin, which gave her unlimited access. I did not argue. Arguing would alert her that I was watching, and a good investigator never lets the suspect know the camera is running. Daniel's condition stabilized on the 2nd day. Dr. Medina explained that the potassium chloride had triggered acute hyperkalemia, a dangerous spike in blood potassium that disrupted his cardiac rhythm and caused the coagulopathy. The IV calcium gluconate had counteracted the immediate cardiac risk, and sodium bicarbonate drips were flushing the excess potassium through his kidneys. His heart rhythm returned to normal sinus by the evening of June 10th. His blood pressure, which had dropped to 82/54 on arrival, climbed back to 118/76. He opened his eyes on the morning of June 11th and said one word. Diego. I told him Diego was fine. He was staying with the Petersons, playing with their golden retriever, drawing fire trucks. Daniel closed his eyes and nodded. He did not ask about Kendra. I noted that the way I would note a door in a burned building that had been locked from the outside significant by its silence. Kendra visited Daniel 3 times during those 72 hours. Each visit lasted between 9 and 14 minutes. She brought flowers on the first visit. Yellow tulips, still wrapped in cellophane from H-E-B. She brought a change of clothes on the second visit, a gray t-shirt and sweatpants folded with the precision of someone stocking a supply shelf. On the third visit, she brought nothing. She stood at the foot of the bed, looked at the monitors, asked the nurse if the discharge date was confirmed, and left. She never touched Daniel. She never held his hand. She never leaned down and whispered the kind of desperate, irrational promises that a wife whispers to a husband she almost lost. I wrote all of it in a pocket notebook, the same brand I had carried on every fire investigation since 1989. Mead. 5 by 3 inches. Spiral bound. Date. Time. Observation. Duration. No interpretation, no emotion, just data. Data does not lie. Data does not grieve. Data waits for you to read it correctly. On the morning of June 12th, my phone rang at 7:41. The caller ID read Lone Star Analytical. Priya's voice was professional but carried a subtle edge. The kind of tone a lab technician uses when the results surprise even her. Mr. Navarro, we completed the full panel on both samples. The tablets you submitted are not prednisone. They are compounded dextrose pills, sugar, essentially pressed to match the size, shape, and color of prednisone 10 milligrams. They contain zero active corticosteroid. Whoever made these had access to a pill press and pharmaceutical-grade dye. I gripped the phone. 4 pills replaced with fakes. That meant for 4 days before the housewarming, my body had received no prednisone. For a man with pulmonary scarring dependent on daily corticosteroids, 4 missed doses would cause gradual inflammation, increased wheezing, reduced oxygen absorption. Not enough to kill quickly. Enough to weaken. Enough to make a 68-year-old man with damaged lungs look like he was declining naturally. And the inhaler? I asked. The canister contained a propellant gas mixed with distilled water and a trace amount of menthol. No albuterol. No bronchodilator of any kind. Effectively, Mr. Navarro, you have been inhaling flavored air. I thanked Priya and asked her to seal the results in a certified report with chain of custody documentation. She said it would be ready by 5 p.m. $240. The price of proving that someone had been slowly dismantling my ability to breathe. I sat on the porch with the phone in my lap and stared at the hill country oak that shaded the front yard. Rosa had loved oak trees. She said they were the only trees stubborn enough to grow in limestone. I thought about what Priya had told me and assembled the evidence the way I would assemble an origin and cause report. Point 1. The margarita. Potassium chloride. Dosed precisely. Intended for me. Delivered by Kendra. Acute method designed to cause immediate cardiac arrest in a man with compromised lungs. Point 2. The prednisone. 4 tablets swapped with sugar pills. Chronic method designed to weaken my respiratory system over days, making the acute poison more lethal or making a natural decline more plausible if the acute method was never used. Point 3. The inhaler. Albuterol replaced with menthol water. Support method. Ensuring that when my breathing worsened from the missing prednisone, my rescue medication would provide no relief. 3 methods. 3 layers. This was not a crime of passion or impulse. This was engineering. Kendra had built a redundant system. If the margarita failed, the slow suffocation would finish the job. If the slow suffocation took too long, the margarita would accelerate it. Every angle covered. Every variable controlled. Every exit sealed. In fire investigation, we call that a belt and suspenders ignition setup. Amateurs use 1 match. Professionals use 3. Spaced apart. Timed to converge. Kendra was not an amateur. I closed the notebook and placed it inside the fireproof lockbox I kept in the bedroom closet. The same box that held Rosa's wedding ring, the deed to the house, and my retirement papers. The evidence was safe. The pattern was clear. Now I needed to find out who had supplied her with the tools to build this fire. Daniel was discharged on June 14th, 6 days after the housewarming. I picked him up from the hospital because Kendra said she had a double shift at Methodist ER. A double shift on the day your husband leaves the ICU. I said nothing. I opened the truck door for him and drove 20 miles per hour below the speed limit because every pothole on the I-10 access road made him wince. He stayed at my house for the first 3 nights. Kendra did not object. She said the hill country air would be good for his recovery, and that Diego could sleep in the guest room with him. I agreed because it gave me what I needed: time with my son and distance from the woman I now believed had tried to kill me. On the second night, after Diego fell asleep between 2 pillows on the guest bed, with his fire truck drawing pinned to the nightstand, Daniel and I sat on the porch. The sky was clear, and the stars over the hill country were the kind of bright that makes you feel both small and permanent at the same time. Daniel held a glass of water. I held coffee. Neither of us had touched alcohol since June 8th. "Dad," he said, "I need to tell you something." I waited. In fire investigation, you learn that the most important information comes in the pause after someone decides to speak. You do not fill that pause. You let it breathe. 3 months ago, I hired a private investigator, he said. Her name is Claire Whitfield. She works out of an office on Broadway, near the Pearl District. I paid her $5,000. I set my coffee down. Why? Because Kendra was lying about money. Small lies at first, a credit card bill she said was paid, a savings balance that didn't match the bank app. Then bigger ones. In March, I found a letter from a collections agency. Lone Star Credit Recovery. They were threatening legal action over a debt of $290,000. $290,000. I let the number settle. A firefighter captain's pension is $48,000 a year. A fire inspector's salary is $61,000. An ER nurse at Methodist earns roughly $72,000. None of those numbers explain how a 33-year-old woman accumulates a debt nearly 5 times her annual income, Daniel continued. Claire traced the debt to 3 sources. First, an online trading account on a platform called NovaTrade, registered under Kendra's maiden name, Blake. She lost $147,000 in leveraged options between September 2023 and February 2024. She was betting on pharmaceutical stocks, big swings, no hedging, pure speculation. He paused and looked at the oak tree. Second, a personal loan of $80,000 from a private lender named Raymond Fisk. Fisk operates out of Laredo. Claire says he's connected to unlicensed lending networks along the border. The interest rate was 22%, compounding monthly. By June, the 80 had grown to 93,000. And the third? I asked. Credit cards. 4 of them. All maxed. 50,000 combined. She opened 2 of them, using my social security number without my knowledge. I did the math. 147 plus 93 plus 50. $290,000. The number matched the collections letter exactly. Kendra was not just in debt. She was buried. And the dirt was still falling. Claire found something else, Daniel said. He pulled out his phone and opened a folder of screenshots. Kendra's browser history. She deleted most of it. But Claire recovered cached data from the home router. Between April 1st and June 5th, Kendra searched the following terms. He turned the phone toward me. I read the list in the porch light. Potassium chloride lethal dose elderly. How long before potassium chloride causes cardiac arrest? Can potassium chloride be detected in an autopsy? Prednisone withdrawal symptoms in elderly patients. How to press custom pills at home. Albuterol inhaler refill substitute. Life insurance payout timeline, Texas. Beneficiary change form does the insured need to know. 12 searches. 12 entries in a catalog of premeditation. Each one precise, clinical, methodical. The research of a woman who treated murder the way she treated a patient chart. Symptoms, dosage, timing, outcome. I read the list twice. My hands did not shake. My voice did not crack. 42 years of walking into buildings that were already on fire had given me the ability to process horror as information. Horror is just data that hasn't been organized yet. There's one more thing, Daniel said. He closed the phone and looked at me directly. Claire traced the potassium chloride supply. Kendra didn't buy it herself. She got it from someone named Jessica Rowe. Jess. They went to nursing school together at UT Health. Jess works at a veterinary clinic in Bourne Animal Surgical Center. Potassium chloride is used in veterinary euthanasia. It's kept in a locked cabinet. But Jess had access. Jess. The supplier. In every arson case, there is a person who provides the accelerant, the gasoline, the solvent, the thermite. They never strike the match themselves. They simply make the fire possible and then step back into the shadows. Jess was the accelerant supplier. I looked at Daniel. My son's face was thin from 6 days of hospital food and IV fluids. His eyes were tired, but steady. He had carried this knowledge for 3 months, the debt, the searches, the supplier, and he had said nothing until now. "Why didn't you tell me before the party?" I asked. Daniel stared at the stars for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and certain, because I needed proof that would hold up in court. And the only way to get that proof was to let her try. The stars burned above us. The oak tree stood still. And I understood, with a clarity that felt like the moment a fire reveals its origin, that my son had walked into the flames on purpose. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed with Rose's quilt pulled to my chest and stared at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, patient circles. The blades cut through the dark the way a question cuts through silence, rhythmic, relentless, offering no answers. My son had drunk poison on purpose. He had watched his wife pour death into a glass, and he had picked it up and swallowed it because he needed the evidence to be undeniable. That is not courage. That is something beyond courage. Something that lives in the space between love and madness, where fathers and sons make decisions that cannot be taken back. By 5 a.m., I was on the porch with coffee. The hill country dawn came in layers, first gray, then copper, then a pale gold that touched the tops of the live oaks before it reached the ground. I opened my notebook and wrote a single question at the top of a fresh page. Who is Megan Calloway? She had appeared at the housewarming uninvited. Kendra introduced her as a neighbor from the new development, a quarter-mile east, Stone Creek Estates. Megan was mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, dressed in a linen blouse and sandals. She smiled easily and asked questions that a neighbor should not ask on a first meeting. What was my pension structure? Had I considered selling the property? How many acres exactly? What was the assessed value per acre? At the time, I had filed those questions as odd but harmless. Now, with Daniel's revelations still fresh, they looked different. They looked like reconnaissance. I drove to Stone Creek Estates at 7:30 a.m. The development was a cluster of 12 homes, most still under construction, with a sales office in a model unit near the entrance. A woman named Brooke staffed the front desk. I told her I was looking for my neighbor Megan Calloway and asked which lot she lived on. Brooke checked her database. "I'm sorry, sir. We don't have a resident or buyer by that name." "Are you sure she lives in Stone Creek?" I described Megan's height, hair, approximate age. Brooke shook her head. "None of our current homeowners match that description. We only have 6 occupied units so far, and I know each family personally." I thanked her and sat in my truck in the parking lot for 11 minutes. Megan Calloway did not live in Stone Creek Estates. Megan Calloway had lied about where she lived, which meant she had likely lied about who she was. And Kendra had introduced her, which meant Kendra either believed the lie or helped construct it. I called Tommy from the truck. He answered on the second ring, the way he always did, no greeting, just a grunt that meant he was listening. I asked him if he remembered Megan from the party. He said yes. She had talked to him briefly near the smoker, asked about property taxes in the area, and whether George's house had a mortgage or was purchased outright. Tommy had told her it was none of her business and walked away. "Why are you asking?" Tommy said. "Because she doesn't exist," I said. "At least not as a neighbor." Tommy was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he said, "You want me to run her plates?" Tommy's nephew, Reuben Reeves, worked as a patrol officer for Bexar County Sheriff's Office. It was not official channels, but a license plate check was simple enough. I told Tommy that Megan had driven a white Toyota RAV4, parked on the street in front of the Garza's house. I had noticed it because I noticed every vehicle on my street, the way I noticed every exit in a burning building automatically. Without thinking, Tommy called back at 9:14 a.m. "Plate comes back to a Megan Calloway, but the registered address is an office suite on Broadway, near the Pearl District. Suite 412. It's listed as a business address, not residential. Broadway near the Pearl District. Suite 412. Daniel had told me that Claire Whitfield, The private investigator he hired worked out of an office on Broadway, near the Pearl District. 2 women, 2 offices, same corridor of the same street in the same district of San Antonio. Coincidence is a word that fire investigators do not use. We use the word pattern. I drove downtown. The building on Broadway was a converted warehouse with exposed brick and iron staircases, the kind of renovation that the Pearl District had embraced over the past decade. I climbed to the 4th floor and found Suite 412. The door was plain. No nameplate. No signage. I knocked. Megan Calloway opened the door. She was wearing glasses I had not seen at the party, and a blazer instead of linen. Her ponytail was gone, replaced by hair pinned neatly behind her ears. But the face was the same. The direct, assessing eyes were the same. "Mr. Navarro," she said, as if she had been expecting me. "Please come in." The office was small: a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, a laptop, and a corkboard on the wall covered with photographs, printouts, and red string connecting them like a web. I recognized some of the photographs. Kendra at a bank. Kendra entering a building I did not recognize. A man I had never seen. Mid-40s, heavyset. Standing outside a pawn shop in Laredo, and in the center a photograph of my house taken from the street, dated May 15th. "My name is not Megan Calloway," she said. "It is Claire Whitfield. Your son hired me in March. I've been investigating your daughter-in-law for 93 days. I sat down in the chair across from her desk. The corkboard stared at me like a burn pattern diagram, every thread connecting one point of evidence to another, converging toward a single origin. "Tell me everything," I said. Claire Whitfield spoke the way a fire spreads through a well-ventilated structure, steadily, without hesitation, consuming every gap in my understanding until nothing was left but the bare framework of the truth. She began with the money. In 93 days, she had built a financial profile of Kendra Blake Navarro that read like an autopsy of ambition. The NovaTrade account Daniel had mentioned was only the surface. Beneath it, Claire had uncovered a second trading account on a platform called Oro Re FX, registered under a shell company named Blake Wellness, LLC. Kendra had opened it in July 2023, using a business license she filed with the Texas Secretary of State for a health consulting firm that had never consulted anyone and never earned a dollar. Through Aurora FX, she had lost an additional $61,000 in cryptocurrency futures, Bitcoin and Ethereum, leveraged at 15-to-1, liquidated in a single cascade on January 8, 2024. Total debt: $350. $1,000. 60. 1,000 more than Daniel knew. Claire pinned a printed brokerage statement to the corkboard as she spoke. Red string connected it to the NovaTrade losses, then to the collections letter from Lone Star Credit Recovery, then to a photograph of Raymond Fisk standing outside a Western Union in Laredo. Fisk, Claire explained, was not simply a private lender. He ran a network of unlicensed loans that operated through border town pawn shops and wire transfer offices, charging interest rates that would make a loan shark wince. Kendra had borrowed $80,000 from Fisk in November 2023. By June 2024, compounding interest had inflated the balance to $93,000. Fisk had sent Kendra 3 text messages in May. Claire had screenshots from the router cache, each one shorter and colder than the last. The final message, dated May 29th, read, "June 30 or I visit your house. Not negotiable." A deadline. Every arson has a trigger, the moment when the pressure exceeds the person's ability to contain it, and the match gets struck. June 30th was Kendra's deadline. The housewarming was June 8th. She had tried to kill me 22 days before the money ran out. Claire moved to the corkboard's right side, where a cluster of photographs showed a woman I did not recognize, mid-20s. Auburn hair, scrubs with a cartoon paw print on the pocket. Jessica Rowe, Claire said. Goes by Jess. She and Kendra graduated from the UT Health Nursing Program in 2015. They stayed close. Jess took a position at Bourne Animal Surgical Center 3 years ago. She has access to the controlled substances cabinet, including potassium chloride solution, which the clinic uses for large animal euthanasia. Claire pulled a delivery receipt from a folder. On May 14th, Jess signed out 200 milliliters of potassium chloride concentrate from the clinic's inventory log. The stated purpose was euthanasia of a horse at a ranch in Comfort. I contacted the ranch. They have no record of any euthanasia procedure in May. The horse is still alive. 200 milliliters. I asked Claire what concentration. She checked her notes, 2 milliequivalents per milliliter, standard veterinary grade. I was not a pharmacist, but 42 years of hazmat response had taught me enough chemistry to understand what that meant. 200 milliliters at that concentration was enough to kill a healthy adult 3 times over. For a 68-year-old man with compromised lungs and 4 days of missed corticosteroids, it would have been virtually instantaneous. Claire connected Jess's photograph to Kendra's with a green string supplier to executor. Then she drew my attention to a second receipt. This one from a website called pillcraft.net. On April 22nd, an order had been placed for a manual pill press and pharmaceutical-grade yellow dye, shipped to a P.O. box in Bourne, registered under the name J. Rowe. The pill press cost $119. The dye cost $133 to manufacture fake prednisone tablets that could slowly strangle my lungs from the inside. Jess built the pills, Claire said. The press matches the tooling marks on the tablets your lab analyzed. I had a forensic pharmacologist compare the Lone Star analytical report with known output from that model of press. It's a match. I stared at the corkboard. It was a diagram of my own death planned, funded, sourced, and assembled over the course of 4 months by 2 women who had smiled at my dinner table. Every string on that board was a decision someone had made. Every photograph was a moment when someone could have stopped and did not. Claire sat down across from me and folded her hands. Mr. Navarro, there is one more thing you need to understand. Your son knew most of this before the housewarming. Not all the ROREFX account and the pill press receipt I confirmed after the party. But he knew about the potassium chloride, the debt, and the Google searches. He came to me on June 6th, 2 days before the party, and told me his plan. What plan? I asked, though the answer was already forming in my chest like pressure before a backdraft. Daniel told me he was going to attend the party, watch Kendra serve the drink, and drink it himself. He said he would rather be the victim with evidence in his bloodstream than let you be the victim with no one to investigate. He asked me to be at the party as a witness, document everything, and if he survived, to compile a case file for the Bexar County District Attorney. The room went quiet. The hum of the building's old HVAC system filled the silence the way smoke fills a hallway, not violently, but completely. My son had not stumbled into a poisoned glass. He had chosen it. He had calculated the risk, accepted the odds, and swallowed the fire so that I would not have to burn. Claire opened a drawer and placed a flash drive on the desk between us. Everything is on here. Financial records, browser cache, Jess's inventory logs, the pill press receipt, my surveillance photographs, and a signed affidavit from the ranch in Comfort confirming no euthanasia took place. This is your son's case file, Mr. Navarro. He built it for you. I picked up the flash drive. It was small and black, the size of my thumbnail. It held the weight of $351,000 in debt, 200 milliliters of stolen poison, 12 damning searches, and 1 act of sacrifice that I would spend the rest of my life trying to deserve. What do we do now? I asked. Claire looked at the corkboard one final time. Now we bring it to the fire marshal. I drove home from Claire's office with the flash drive in my shirt pocket, pressed against my chest like a second heartbeat. The weight of what it contained was not physical, it was gravitational. The kind of mass that bends everything around it until the world tilts and you have to relearn how to stand. My son had chosen to drink poison. My daughter-in-law had chosen to serve it. And somewhere between those two choices, the family I had spent 68 years building had caught fire in a way that no amount of water could extinguish. Daniel and Diego had returned to Kendra's house on Meadowbend Drive the previous evening. Kendra had insisted. She said Diego needed his own bed, his own routine, his school friends nearby. Daniel agreed, because as he told me on the phone, maintaining the appearance of normalcy was critical. If Kendra suspected that anyone knew, she would destroy evidence, contact Jess, and possibly flee. Claire had said the same thing. Keep the temperature low until we're ready to open the door. A backdraft kills the firefighter who opens too early, so I kept the temperature low. I called Daniel every morning at 7 and every evening at 8. I visited on Wednesday and Friday for dinner. Sitting at Kendra's table, eating her roasted chicken, watching her pour iced tea with the same precise hands that had poured poison into a margarita glass 11 days earlier. I studied her face for cracks, the way I used to study drywall for heat signatures, looking for the glow behind the surface that tells you the fire is still burning on the other side. Kendra gave nothing away. She asked about my breathing. She reminded me to take my prednisone. She suggested I schedule a follow-up with my pulmonologist, Dr. Rivera, because she had noticed I was wheezing more than usual at the housewarming. Every word was calibrated concern without urgency, care without intimacy. The bedside manner of a nurse who knows exactly how much warmth to dispense before the shift ends. On Saturday, June 22nd, I drove to Kendra and Daniel's house to pick up Diego for a weekend stay. Daniel had a fire inspection conference in Austin and would be gone until Sunday night. Kendra said she had back-to-back shifts. I arrived at 9 a.m. Diego ran to my truck with his backpack and the fire truck drawing he had made at the housewarming, now laminated by his teacher and taped to the inside of his folder. Before we left, I went inside to use the restroom. It was not the restroom I needed. It was access. I walked through the kitchen and stopped at the stove. Kendra's house had a natural gas range, a 5-burner Bosch, stainless steel, installed 2 years ago. As a fire captain, I had inspected thousands of gas appliances. I knew the anatomy of a gas line the way a surgeon knows the anatomy of a vein. I crouched behind the range and looked at the flexible connector that ran from the wall shutoff valve to the back of the stove. The connector had been loosened. Not disconnected, loosened. A quarter turn, maybe less. Just enough to allow a slow, invisible leak of natural gas into the kitchen. The kind of leak that would not trigger a standard methane detector for hours because the concentration would build gradually, parts per million at a time, until the room reached the lower explosive limit of 5%. At that point, any ignition sourced the stove's own pilot light reigniting after a power flicker, a light switch. A static spark from a sock-on tile would turn the kitchen into a fireball. I tightened the connector with my fingers, then checked it with the crescent wrench I kept in my truck's toolbox. I brought the wrench inside under the pretense of fixing a loose cabinet hinge that Diego had mentioned last week. No one saw me. No one asked. I checked every other gas connection in the house. The dryer line in the laundry room was secure. The water heater in the garage was secure. Only the stove connector had been tampered with. And the tampering was subtle enough that a plumber on a routine inspection might have missed it. But I was not a plumber. I was a man who had spent 4 decades reading the language of fire. And this connector spoke a dialect I recognized, deliberate, patient, designed to look like an accident. I photographed the connector from 3 angles with my phone before I tightened it. I photographed the shutoff valve, the gas line routing, and the position of the nearest CO detector, which was in the hallway, 12 feet from the stove, mounted at ceiling height. Methane is lighter than air and rises, but in a kitchen with a range hood vent drawing air upward, the gas would disperse laterally before it reached the hallway sensor. The detector's placement was adequate by code but insufficient for a slow, targeted leak at floor level. Kendra would have known this. An ER nurse understands gas exposure. A nurse who researches potassium chloride lethal dose elderly understands explosion. This was the 4th method. Margarita, fake prednisone, hollow inhaler. And now a loosened gas valve in a kitchen where her husband and son ate breakfast every morning. She was not building a single trap. She was building a minefield, redundant, overlapping, each device independent of the others, so that if one failed, another waited. In arson investigation, we call this distributed ignition. It is the signature of someone who has moved past desperation into engineering. I loaded Diego into the truck. He buckled his seatbelt and asked if we could stop for barbacoa tacos at Lupita's on Nogalitos Street. I said yes. He smiled the way only an 8-year-old can smile fully, without reservation, as if the world were a safe place built entirely of fire trucks and tacos and grandfathers who would never let anything burn. I turned onto I-10 and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. 4 methods. 3. Confirmed by lab results and private investigation. 1 confirmed by my own hands, 60 seconds ago, behind a Bosch stove in the kitchen where my grandson eats cereal every morning. The flash drive in my pocket felt heavier now. The case file was growing, and so was the fire. Diego fell asleep at 8:47 p.m., with his fire truck drawing clutched against his chest and his shoes still on. I unlaced them one at a time and set them by the guest bed. His breathing was slow, and even the breathing of a child who trusts the walls around him to hold. I pulled the quilt to his chin, turned off the lamp, and closed the door with the care of a man diffusing a charge. I sat on the porch in the dark. The hill country sky was moonless, and the only light came from the kitchen window behind me and the faint amber glow of San Antonio's skyline 30 miles southeast. I needed to think. 4 methods of attempted murder, a debt of $351,000. A supplier named Jess who had stolen veterinary-grade poison and built counterfeit pills. A lender named Fisk with a June 30th deadline. And my son, recovering from a dose of potassium chloride he had swallowed voluntarily to create the evidence that could end all of it. The evidence was strong. Claire's flash drive contained enough documentation to walk into the Bexar County District Attorney's office on Monday morning and file charges. But something nagged at me, a draft coming from a direction I could not locate. The kind of imperceptible airflow that tells a firefighter there is an open window somewhere feeding the fire. I had the what. I had the who. I had the how. What I did not have was the conversation, the moment when Kendra and Jess sat down and agreed to kill a 68-year-old man for money. Without that, a defense attorney could argue coincidence, could separate the 2 women into isolated actors, could claim Jess did not know what the potassium chloride was for, could suggest the fake pills were a pharmacy error. I needed the link spoken aloud, recorded, undeniable. At 9:32 p.m., my phone buzzed. The screen read Daniel. I answered. Dad, I'm still in Austin. The conference ends tomorrow at noon. But I need to tell you something. Kendra called me 20 minutes ago. She sounded different. Different how? Nervous. She asked if I had talked to anyone about the hospital stay, specifically if I had spoken with any lawyers or investigators. She said a friend of hers told her that hospitals sometimes report unusual toxicology results to the police, and she wanted to make sure we weren't making it into a bigger deal than it was. She called it a freak accident. She said maybe the tequila was contaminated. Maybe the bartender at the liquor store mixed something wrong. Contaminated tequila. A freak accident. She was building her defense in real time, testing the narrative on Daniel to see if he would accept it. She was reading the smoke to determine which way the wind was blowing. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her I hadn't talked to anyone. I told her I was focused on the conference and that we could discuss it when I got home. I kept the temperature low, like Claire said. Good. Daniel was holding the line. But Kendra's call meant the pressure was rising. She was sensing something, perhaps the absence of the loosened gas connector, perhaps the silence from the hospital, perhaps just the animal instinct that tells a guilty person the walls are closing. Pressure creates urgency, and urgency creates mistakes. Daniel, I said, when you get back tomorrow, I need you to do something. I need you to call Kendra and tell her you've been having chest pains since the hospital. Tell her you're worried about long-term damage. Tell her you want to visit me at the Hill Country house for a few days to rest. Make it sound medical. not suspicious. Why? Because I want her to come here. I want her in this house, on my ground, where I control the exits and the cameras. There was a pause. I heard the hum of a hotel air conditioner through the phone. Daniel's voice came back quieter. You have cameras? Tommy installed 2 on Wednesday. One covers the porch and the front door. The other covers the kitchen and the hallway to the bathroom where my medication cabinet is. Motion activated. Cloud stored. Time stamped. If she touches anything in this house, I will have it on video with a date code that no defense attorney can challenge. The cameras had been Tommy's idea. He had brought them in a bag from Home Depot Blink mini units, $69 for a 2-pack, and mounted them while I distracted the installation with a fake conversation about replacing the porch railing. Tommy worked quickly and quietly, the way he had always worked on the engine. No wasted motion, no unnecessary words, just the job done right. There's one more thing, I said. Claire is going to contact you tomorrow about setting up a monitored phone line. Texas is a one-party consent state. If you call Kendra and record the conversation, it's legal as long as you are a participant. Claire has the equipment. She wants you to call Kendra, mention the hospital bills, mention insurance, and let her talk. If Kendra says anything about the margarita, the medication, or Jess, it's admissible. Daniel was quiet for a long time. I could hear him breathing steady, deliberate. The breathing of a man who had already decided how far he was willing to go, but was measuring the distance one more time. Dad, he said, when this is over, I want Diego to know that his father did the right thing, not the safe thing, the right thing. My throat tightened. I looked through the guest room window. Diego's small shape rose and fell beneath the quilt, rising and falling with the rhythm of a child who did not yet know that the house around him was surrounded by fire. He'll know, I said. I'll make sure he knows. I hung up and sat in the silence. The oak tree creaked in a wind I could not feel. Somewhere southeast, a siren wailed engine or ambulance. I could not tell. The sound faded the way all sirens fade, swallowed by distance until only the memory of urgency remains. Tomorrow Kendra would come to this house. She would walk through my door, sit at my table, and smile the smile of a woman who believed she was still in control of the fire. She did not know that the building she was standing in had already been evacuated, that the evidence was already sealed, and that every step she took from this point forward was being recorded. In 42 years of firefighting, I learned that the most dangerous moment is not when the fire starts. It is when the arsonist returns to the scene, convinced the evidence has burned. They always come back. And they always underestimate the man standing in the ashes. Kendra arrived at my house on Monday, June 24th, at 11:15 a.m. She drove the BMW X5 pearl white tinted windows, lease payment $642 a month on a vehicle she could not afford with a salary she was already spending twice. Daniel sat in the passenger seat. Diego sat in the back, waving at me through the glass before the engine was off. I stood on the porch and smiled. It was the hardest performance of my life. 42 years of entering burning buildings had never required me to pretend the fire was not there. But today the mission was containment, not suppression. Let the fire believe it is in control. Let the arsonist walk through the door. Record everything. Tommy's cameras were running. One Blink Mini sat on the bookshelf in the living room, angled to capture the kitchen and the hallway leading to the bathroom. The other was mounted beneath the porch eave, disguised behind a hanging fern Rosa had planted 3 years ago. Both fed to a cloud account linked to my phone and Tommy's. The motion detection sensitivity was set to the highest level. A housefly could trigger it. Daniel looked better. Color had returned to his face, and he walked without the careful stiffness that had marked his first week out of the hospital. He carried a duffel bag and Diego's backpack. He shook my hand at the door, and in the grip I felt the pressure of a message he could not say aloud. I'm ready. Kendra carried a casserole dish. King Ranch chicken. She handed it to me with both hands and said, I made your favorite, Dad. Daniel said, You haven't been eating well." Her voice was warm, her eyes steady, and her smile arrived at the exact right moment. Not too early, not too late. Calibrated to the millisecond. I had seen that precision before. On the night she poured the margarita. Warmth as a delivery mechanism. I took the casserole and thanked her. I did not eat it. Later that evening, after Kendra went to bed in the guest room, I sealed a portion in a Ziploc bag and placed it in the freezer behind a bag of frozen corn. If it was clean, no harm done. If it was not, I would have another data point. The first afternoon passed in the theater of normalcy. Diego drew pictures on the porch. Daniel read a paperback in the living room recliner. Kendra offered to organize my medication cabinet just to make sure everything's in order, Dad. Since you've been wheezing. I told her I had already reorganized it myself, and that Dr. Rivera had adjusted my dosage. She smiled and did not press the issue, but I watched her eyes flicker toward the bathroom hallway twice in the next hour, measuring distance, calculating opportunity. At 4:17 p.m., I told everyone I was going to take a nap. I walked to my bedroom, closed the door loudly enough to be heard, and opened my phone to the Blink app. The kitchen camera was live. I watched. For 22 minutes, nothing happened. Daniel was in the living room. Diego was on the porch. Kendra was in the kitchen, washing dishes from lunch. Then, at 4:39, she dried her hands, glanced toward the living room, and walked down the hallway to the bathroom. She opened the medicine cabinet. The camera captured her from the left side, her profile sharp against the bathroom light, her hands moving with the quick, practiced efficiency of a nurse who has opened 1,000 cabinets in 1,000 rooms. She picked up the prednisone bottle, unscrewed the cap, and poured the tablets into her left palm. She counted them. Then she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small plastic bag containing 4 yellow tablets, identical in size and color to the prednisone. She removed the real tablets, 4 of them, and replaced them with the 4 from the bag. She poured the mixture back into the bottle, shook it gently to randomize the order, screwed the cap on, and placed the bottle back on the shelf. The real tablets went into her cardigan pocket. The entire operation took 41 seconds. I lay on my bed and watched the playback. I watched it 3 times. On the third viewing, I paused on the frame where her fingers held the plastic bag, the same pharmaceutical-grade yellow dye, the same pressed shape, the same counterfeit craftsmanship that Lone Star Analytical had identified in the first batch. Jess Rowe's work. Delivered into my medicine cabinet by Jess Rowe's best friend. 41 seconds. No hesitation, no tremor, no conscience. I saved the footage to the cloud, downloaded a local copy to my phone, and texted Tommy a single word. Confirmed. He replied with a period. That was our code. A period meant received. Understood. No further communication needed. We had used it on the engine for 20 years. At 6 p.m., I emerged from the bedroom and joined the family for dinner. Kendra had reheated the King Ranch chicken. Daniel served plates. Diego said grace, a simple prayer Rosa had taught him. Thank you for the food. Thank you for the family. And thank you for keeping us safe. His voice was clear and sincere, and it cut through me like a thermal lance through a steel door. I ate the chicken. I had watched Kendra prepare the plates on the live camera feed from my bedroom. She had served from the same dish, without separating portions, which meant she had not tampered with individual servings. The casserole sample in the freezer was insurance, not suspicion. Tonight the danger was in the medicine cabinet, not on the table. After dinner, Daniel took Diego to brush his teeth. Kendra cleared the plates. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her. She hummed a song I did not recognize. Soft, absent-minded, the hum of a woman who believed her 41 seconds had gone unnoticed. Kendra, I said. She turned. Yes, Dad? Thank you for coming. It means a lot to have the family together. She smiled. That's what family is for. I nodded and walked to the porch. The night air was warm and heavy with cedar. I sat in the chair where Rosa used to read and looked at the sky. The cameras were recording. The footage was saved. The pills in the cabinet were marked. I had scratched a microscopic X into each real prednisone tablet with a pin before Kendra arrived, so the swap could be verified forensically. The trap was set. The arsonist had returned to the scene, and this time, every match she struck was being filmed. The next morning, Daniel made the call. Claire had delivered the recording equipment the previous night. A small digital device, no larger than a thumb drive, that plugged into the base of Daniel's phone and captured both sides of the conversation in uncompressed audio. She had tested it twice at her office and confirmed the output was court admissible under Texas Penal Code. Section 16.0. 2. One-party consent. Clean chain of custody. Time-stamped metadata. Daniel was the consenting party. Everything Kendra said would be on record. He made the call from the porch at 9:22 a.m. while I sat inside the kitchen, listening through earbuds connected to the Blink camera feed. The porch camera captured Daniel's face. The audio device captured every word. Diego was inside with me, eating scrambled eggs and drawing a Dalmatian he wanted to name Captain. Daniel called Kendra at the Meadowbend house. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, babe. How are you feeling?" Her voice was light, domestic. The voice of a woman checking on a recovering husband. "Better," Daniel said, "but I'm worried about the hospital bills. I checked the insurance portal this morning. The ER visit, the ICU stay. The labs, it's showing an estimated patient responsibility of $18,000 after coverage." Silence. 3 seconds. Then Kendra said, "That's a lot. But we'll figure it out." "We always do," Daniel pressed. "That's the thing, I don't know if we can. I've been looking at our accounts. The joint savings is almost empty." "Kendra, there was $41,000 in there in January. Now there's $6,000. Where did the money go?" A longer silence. 5 seconds. I counted them the way I count. Seconds. In a ventilation-limited fire. Each one, a measure of oxygen being consumed. Each one bringing the flashpoint closer. "I had some expenses," Kendra said. "Medical equipment for a continuing education course. Some repairs on the car. I meant to tell you. But with everything that happened, $35,000 in expenses you meant to tell me about?" "Daniel, I don't think this is the right time to." "When is the right time?" "I almost died, Kendra. I was in the ICU for 6 days. And I come home to find our savings gutted. And you can't explain where the money went." His voice was steady. Not angry, controlled. The voice of a man who knows exactly what he is doing and where every word is leading. Claire had coached him the night before. Escalate the financial pressure. Let Kendra fill the silence. Do not accuse. Only question. Kendra's breathing changed. I heard it through the earbuds, shorter, faster, the respiratory pattern of someone whose sympathetic nervous system is shifting from rest to defense. An ER nurse would recognize that pattern in a patient. She did not recognize it in herself. "Okay," she said. "I'm online. A trading platform. It didn't go well. I lost more than I expected. And I took a personal loan to cover the losses. And the loan has interest. And it got out of control." "How much?" 8 seconds of silence. The longest pause yet. "About $290,000. Daniel let the number hang. He did not gasp, did not shout, did not demand explanation. He let the silence do what silence does. Best create a vacuum that the other person feels compelled to fill. Kendra filled it. "I know it sounds insane. I know. But I had a plan. I was going to fix it. Your dad's house, the property value, the pension, the life insurance if something happened to him. If his health declined, the estate would cover everything. I was never going to let it hurt you or Diego. I was protecting the family." I closed my eyes. There it was. Spoken aloud, recorded, time-stamped. If something happened to him, if his health declined. She had not said the word kill. She did not need to. The prosecution would play this sentence beside the lab reports, the Google searches, the camera footage of the pill swap, and the jury would hear what she meant as clearly as I heard it now. My death was her financial plan, Daniel continued. Kendra, the margarita at the housewarming. The doctors said it had potassium chloride in it. That's not contaminated tequila. I don't know how that got there. I swear, Daniel. Maybe someone at the store. The store didn't put it there. And the potassium chloride matches a veterinary supply. Jess works at a vet clinic. Kendra. Silence. Then, in a voice stripped of all its earlier warmth, who told you that? It doesn't matter who told me. Did Jess give you the potassium chloride? The line went quiet. I heard what sounded like a door closing on Kendra's end. She was moving to a room where she could not be overheard, even though she lived alone in the house. Guilt seeks privacy even when privacy is unnecessary. She was trying to help me, Kendra whispered. I told her about the debt. I told her about Fisk. She said she could get something from the clinic that would look natural, like a heart attack. She said at his age, with his lungs, nobody would question it. I didn't want to do it, Daniel. I was desperate. Fisk threatened to come to the house. He threatened Diego, every word recorded. Every sentence a brick in the wall of the prosecution's case. Jess identified as the supplier. Fisk identified as the pressure. Kendra's own voice confirming the intent, the method, the target. Daniel's voice cracked for the first time. It was not performance. It was the sound of a man hearing his wife confess to the attempted murder of his father, while his 8-year-old son sat 10 feet away, drawing a Dalmatian named Captain. And the pills, Kendra? My dad's prednisone? Jess made those too. She has a press. She said, if the first thing didn't work, the pills would weaken him slowly. Make it look like his lungs were giving out. Nobody would investigate a 68-year-old man with pulmonary scarring dying of respiratory failure. Yes, the word fell like a match into an open gas line. 1 syllable. 3 letters. The confession complete. Daniel ended the call at 9:41 a.m. 19 minutes. He walked inside, set the recording device on the kitchen table, and sat down across from me. His hands were shaking. His eyes were red. Diego looked up from his drawing and said, Daddy, are you okay? Daniel put his hand on Diego's head and said, I'm okay, buddy. Just allergies. I picked up the device and held it in my palm. It contained 19 minutes of audio that would end Kendra's freedom and Jess's career and Raymond Fisk's operation. It contained my daughter-in-law's voice admitting she had planned to kill me and make it look like God's work. I placed the device in the fireproof lockbox next to Claire's flash drive, Rosa's wedding ring, and the deed to the house. Then I called Claire and said 2 words. We're ready. Claire Whitfield walked into the Bexar County District Attorney's office at 8:45 a.m. on Thursday, June 27th, carrying a manila envelope, the flash drive, and a USB audio recorder containing 19 minutes of Kendra Blake Navarro's confession. I sat in the truck outside. Daniel sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. We had said everything that needed saying on the porch 2 nights ago. Now, the words belonged to the law. Claire had arranged the meeting through a contact Assistant District Attorney, Luis Delgado, a man she had worked with on 3 prior cases involving financial fraud and elder abuse. Delgado was 41, former Army JAG, known for building airtight cases and despising plea bargains. Claire said he was the kind of prosecutor who treated a case file the way an architect treats a blueprint, every beam load-bearing, every joint reinforced. Nothing decorative. She was inside for 2 hours and 14 minutes. When she came out, she was accompanied by Delgado himself and a detective I had not seen before. A woman in plain clothes, mid-30s, badge clipped to her belt. Claire introduced her as Detective Natalie Voss, Bexar County Special Crimes Unit. Voss shook my hand with a grip that meant business and looked me in the eye with the directness of someone who had seen worse than what I was about to describe. Mr. Navarro, Voss said. I've reviewed the materials Miss Whitfield presented. I'd like you and your son to come inside and give formal statements. Separately, we followed her through a side entrance, past a metal detector and a hallway lined with interview rooms. The building smelled like industrial carpet and photocopier toner. The smell of bureaucracy working at the speed it always works, which is never fast enough when your family is on fire. Daniel went first. They took him to interview room C. I waited in a plastic chair in the hallway and counted the ceiling tiles the way I used to count seconds between smoke pulses. A habit that calmed my breathing and kept my mind from racing ahead of the evidence. Daniel was inside for 1 hour and 37 minutes. When he came out, his eyes were dry but his jaw was tight. The muscles knotted beneath the skin like rope under tension. He sat down next to me and said, "Your turn, Dad." Detective Voss led me to interview room A. It was small, a table, 3 chairs, a camera mounted in the upper corner, a digital recorder on the table. Voss sat across from me. A second detective, an older man, named Sergeant Paul Herrera, sat to her left. He had a notepad and a pen and the patient expression of someone who had conducted 1,000 interviews and knew that the truth comes out at its own pace. "Mr. Navarro," Voss began, "please start from the beginning. The housewarming party. June 8th. I told them everything. I told them about Kendra's precise hands, about Diego pulling my wrist and the fire truck drawing that saved my life, about Daniel collapsing on the limestone floor and the blood that found the grain of the stone and held. I told them about the hospital, Dr. Medina's diagnosis, Nurse Janet's words. Someone measured this. I told them about the missing prednisone tablets, the hollow inhaler, the lab results from Lone Star Analytical Dextrose pills, menthol water, $240 that confirmed what my instincts already knew. I told them about Claire, about driving to Stone Creek Estates and finding that Megan Calloway did not exist, about the corkboard in Suite 412 with red string and surveillance photographs, and a flash drive that held 93 days of evidence. I told them about the Nova Trade losses, the OroReFX account, Blake Wellness LLC, Raymond Fisk and his June 30th deadline, and Jessica Rowe signing out 200 milliliters of potassium chloride for a horse that was still alive in comfort. I told them about the gas valve, the quarter turn on the Bosch stove connector at Kendra's house on Meadow Bend Drive, photographed from 3 angles, tightened with my own hands while my grandson waited in the truck with his laminated fire truck drawing. I told them about the cameras. Tommy's Blink Minis, $69, cloud-stored, time-stamped. The 41-second footage of Kendra swapping 4 prednisone tablets in my medicine cabinet with counterfeits manufactured by Jess Rowe using a pill press ordered from pillcraft.net for $133. And I told them about the phone call. Daniel's 19 minutes. Kendra's voice saying, "If something happened to him," and looked natural, like a heart attack, and the single word that sealed everything. "Yes." Sergeant Herrera wrote without stopping. Voss asked clarifying questions, dates, dosages, addresses, names, and I answered each one the way I answered questions at fire scene depositions. Factually, chronologically, without editorializing. Data. Just data. When I finished, Voss turned off the recorder and looked at me for a long moment. "Mr. Navarro, in 14 years of special crimes work, I have never seen a civilian build a case this thorough. You have physical evidence, laboratory confirmation, financial records, digital surveillance, and a recorded confession. Most cases I prosecute have 2 of those. You have all 5. I did not feel pride. I felt the hollow, ringing stillness that comes after a fire is fully extinguished when the smoke clears and you see the damage for the first time, and realize that saving the structure cost you something you cannot rebuild. What happens now?" I asked. Voss stood. "Now we execute arrest warrants. Kendra Blake Navarro for attempted murder in the 1st degree, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and insurance fraud. Jessica Rowe, for conspiracy to commit murder, theft of controlled substances, and manufacturing counterfeit pharmaceuticals. Raymond Fisk, for unlicensed lending and criminal coercion. ADA Delgado is drafting the warrants now. We expect to execute by tomorrow morning. I thanked her and walked out of the room. Daniel was waiting in the hallway. He stood when he saw me, and for a moment we just looked at each other, a father and a son standing in a government hallway with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the same frequency as the emergency room, the same flat hum that separates the living from the dying. "It's done," I said. Daniel nodded. Then he said something I will carry for the rest of my life. "Mom would be proud of you, Dad." I put my hand on his shoulder and held it there, because words were not enough, and touch was the only language left. Rosa would not have been proud. Rosa would have been heartbroken. But she would have understood that sometimes the only way to save a house is to let the fire reveal itself completely before you put it out. We walked to the truck. The sun was high, and the Texas heat pressed against the asphalt like a hand on a wound. Tomorrow, the warrants would be served. Tomorrow, Kendra would learn that the building she thought she had burned was still standing, and the firefighter she thought she had buried was the one holding the hose. They arrested Kendra at 6:12 a.m. on Friday, June 28th, at the house on Meadowbend Drive. Detective Voss led the team 2 patrol units, 1 unmarked vehicle, and a Bexar County Sheriff's deputy for transport. Daniel had taken Diego to my house the night before, under the pretense of a weekend camping trip. Diego packed his backpack with crayons, his Dalmatian drawing, and a flashlight he called his rescue light. He did not know that his mother would be in handcuffs before he finished his breakfast. Claire told me the details later. Kendra answered the door in a bathrobe. She saw the badges and the warrant, and her face went through 3 phases in under 4 seconds. Confusion, recognition, and a stillness that Claire described as clinical. She did not cry. She did not protest. She extended her wrists and said, "I want a lawyer." The last words she spoke as a free woman were procedural. Even at the end, she was following protocol. Jessica Rowe was arrested 47 minutes later at her apartment in Bourne. She was less composed. She cried, asked to call her mother, and told the arresting officers that she had only been trying to help a friend. The potassium chloride, the pill press, the counterfeit tablets, all just helping a friend. As if friendship were a defense for manufacturing the instruments of murder, Raymond Fisk proved more difficult. He had left his Laredo address 3 days before the warrant was issued, likely tipped off by the sudden silence from Kendra. U.S. Marshals located him 9 days later at a motel in Eagle Pass, 14 miles from the Mexican border, carrying $42,000 in cash and a prepaid phone with no contacts saved. He did not resist arrest. Men like Fisk understand that running is a temporary solution and that borders are lines on a map that the law eventually erases. The trial began in October. Ada Delgado built his case the way Claire had predicted, methodically, structurally. Every piece of evidence, a load-bearing wall. The jury heard the Lone Star analytical report. They saw the blink camera footage of Kendra's 41-second pill swap. They listened to 19 minutes of recorded confession. They reviewed Claire's 93-day investigation file, the pillcraft, net receipt, the veterinary inventory log with Jess's signature, and the photograph of a horse in comfort that was very much alive. Kendra's defense attorney, a private hire named Martin Schaefer, attempted 3 strategies. First, he argued entrapment, that Daniel had manipulated the phone call to extract a false confession. Delgado played the audio and let the jury hear Kendra's unprompted words. She said at his age, with his lungs, nobody would question it. Unprompted, uncoerced, unmistakable. Second, Schaefer argued that the gas valve evidence was circumstantial. Anyone could have loosened the connector. Delgado presented my photographs, my testimony, and an expert witness from the SAFD arson unit, who confirmed the quarter turn was consistent with intentional tampering. Third, Schaefer attempted to shift blame entirely to Jess. Kendra was a desperate woman. manipulated by a more sophisticated co-conspirator. The jury looked at the camera footage of Kendra calmly swapping pills in my medicine cabinet and decided that a woman who replaces a dying man's medication with sugar does not look manipulated. She looks precise. The verdict came on November 14th. Kendra Blake Navarro, guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, 15 years. Conspiracy to commit murder, 10 years. Concurrent. Elder abuse, 5 years. Consecutive. Insurance fraud, 3 years. Consecutive. Total sentence: 23 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, with eligibility for parole after 11 and a half. She was 33 years old. She would be 44 before she could petition for release. Jessica Rowe. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, theft of controlled substances, and manufacturing counterfeit pharmaceuticals. 7 years. She would serve at least 3.5. Raymond Fisk. Guilty of unlicensed lending and criminal coercion. 4 years. Plus forfeiture of all recovered assets. $312,000 seized from accounts in Laredo and Eagle Pass. Daniel filed for divorce on the day of the verdict. It was granted in December. Uncontested. He received full custody of Diego. Kendra did not fight it. Perhaps she understood that the only thing she had left to give her son was the absence of herself. The months that followed moved slowly. The way embers cool after a structure fire, heat lingering in places you do not expect, flaring up when the wind shifts. Daniel sold the house on Meadow Bend Drive and moved into my hill country home. We converted the garage into a small apartment for him. His own entrance, his own kitchen. Close enough to share dinners and far enough to preserve the independence that a 35-year-old man needs. Tommy helped with the renovation. He brought his tools and his silence and his steady hands, and we built the walls together the way we had done everything together for 40 years. Diego started 3rd grade at Johnson Elementary in September. His teacher, Mrs. Fuentes, told Daniel that Diego had written an essay titled "My Grandpa the Firefighter." In it, he described the housewarming party as the night Grandpa saved everyone by being brave. He did not mention the margarita, or the ambulance, or the blood on the limestone floor. He remembered the fire truck drawing, the barbecue, and the moment his grandfather knelt beside him on the porch and said, "That's the best fire truck I've ever seen, mijo." Children remember what matters. They let the rest burn away. I kept Rosa's quilt on the bed. I kept her percolator on the counter. I kept the oak tree trimmed the way she liked it, high enough to walk under, low enough to shade the porch in the afternoon. And I kept the fireproof lockbox in the bedroom closet, though now it held something new alongside the flash drive, the deed, and Rosa's ring. It held Diego's essay, folded once, placed on top of everything else like a roof on a house that had finally stopped burning. On a Saturday morning in December, 6 months after the housewarming, I sat on the porch with coffee. Daniel was inside making pancakes. Diego was on the floor beside me, drawing. He looked up and said, "Grandpa, what do firefighters do when there's no fire?" I thought about it. I looked at the hill country. Sky. Pale blue, cloudless. The kind of sky that makes you believe in permanence even though you know better. I looked at the oak tree Rosa loved. I looked at the front door of the house I had bought with 42 years of service and 18 months of grief. The house where someone had tried to end my life, and where my son had offered his own to stop it. "We rebuild, mijo," I said. "We rebuild."